Policy language has a way of pushing regular people right out of the conversation. And that's the problem Christy Amada has built a career around solving. She's a communication strategist at Amada Development Services and the host of Policy for Normal People. And she sits down with Don Martelli to talk about turning dense policy into stories people actually care about. They cover targeted messaging, storytelling that drives donations, and building relationships that turn into referrals. This is the PR Bunker podcast. Let's get into it, and here's your host, Don Martelli, CEO of the PR Bunker.
What's up, folks? Welcome back down to the PR Bunker. You might see a familiar face on the screen here. My good friend, Christy Amada, my partner in arms in public relations, who's made some wonderful introductions for me. She's my gal. We talk regularly. Great topic today, but last time she was on my podcast, we were talking to our mutual friend, Remy. But today is all about Christy and all about her work in public relations, public affairs, policy, and her podcast. And we'll get into that in a second. But Christy, welcome back down to the PR Bunker.
Hey, thanks, Don. As always, you're too nice. I mean, our friendship has bloomed and blossomed. We met on Alignable and started out just learning, of course, going through your really quick 20-minute course there, how to use the platform to network, really create meaningful partnerships. And that's been very invaluable to me. But as you say, partners in crime, I mean, we're both in the PR space. We're both in strategic communications, slightly different angles at times, but we understand one another. We understand what our clients, can benefit from with our services and things like that. And I know that we share a love of just helping people better their lives.
Get that
so
right.
it's fantastic to just meet with you regularly and have these chats, whether it's on a episode like this on your podcast on PR Bunker. Love that. But also, I've got a podcast of my own, Policy for Normal People. So I'm focusing in the PR space relative to how policy intersects with things that business leaders are doing. Had a great show the other day that's going to be out soon with a lady called Nancy Becker. A shout out to her for starting a organization that supports women veterans, Invisible
Awesome.
Warriors. So inviting people on like that. But outside of podcasting, as I know you and I both do, to serve nonprofit organizations just like Nancy's and so many others, also bringing, in my case, business leaders on to talk about, what it is they're doing to serve their clients and the relationships they're building. Not just to get paid. We all need to get paid, right? But we're in the business because we want to help people to raise awareness of important issues, important things that people are trying to do. You mentioned Remy Roy, which had been on with you and on with both of us at one time or another. Really, again, kind of another networking triangle we created there, and we
Big
all
time.
stay in touch. And
The
it's
best
been
triangle.
awesome.
I love that. I love that trifecta.
Me too.
I think I love the title of your podcast, and I love the content of it, because policy is a very thick thing, right? And
Yeah.
as somebody who covered politics for the Boston Globe years ago, I would just ask all the questions, because I was such a knucklehead. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, what does that language actually stand for? So I love the normal people at the end, because all this stuff impacts our lives. But before we unpack that entire thing, describe your agency. Describe the kind of clients you are working with, that you want to work with. And, as you know, because we're in this trench together, this is a grind, being a small business owner and kind of being in public relations, which was kind of a industry that really took off, had a bit of a dip when digital media became the thing, but now it's really make a huge comeback because of our content that's placed is cited and being sourced into AI tools. So like us old school folks are kind of making a bit of a resurgence. It's like 90s hip hop. It's making a comeback, right? So like, talk about your brand and flavor of PR around public policy. Kind of describe, I know what it is, but describe to the audience what that's all about.
Yeah, thanks, Don. So the normal part of Policy for Normal People is the key. I'm not a policy expert, but I've kind of been a bit of a policy geek wonk for my entire life, I think. But way back in college, I had this, grand vision of joining the Foreign Service. So I studied languages, learned, became fluent in French and Spanish, and really was studying foreign affairs and then, later domestic policy. But life took a different turn, and for the good, because I had two beautiful children, got married, and kind of took a different path. And even though those two lifestyles, for me at least, didn't quite mesh at the time, I stayed engaged. And policy, as you said it perfectly, it's really complex. It's heavy, and I think that there's a tendency in the public in general, we're all busy raising children. We're all busy, working and trying to make a living and doing whatever it is we do and finding some time to take care of our health and other things. There's not a lot of space left in a day to unpack some really complex policy issues. But the fact is, policy affects our lives, whether we know it or not, at every level of governing. And so I'm really trying to get to just unpacking that in a way that is easy for average people like myself. Cause like I said, I'm not an expert. I'm just curious. I'm asking questions like you did when you were at the Globe, and bringing people on who either have more knowledge than I do in the space and have something to share worthwhile that we can unpack in a more layman's term kind of way. And also the most important part, Dawn, is taking the politics out of it. Because as we know, politics puts its own spin on, there's different interests there. Not to say that politicians, there aren't some good ones out there trying to do good things for people, but when you really listen to what they say versus what you read in a policy briefing or a statement or a law that's been passed, oftentimes they're very different. And so sometimes we get into the details, sometimes we just hit the surface, but we try to really, my goal is really just to talk about policy in a way that matters to people on the ground. Like, it's not, instead of making it this highbrow thing that, is kind of just something that, you hear a clip on the news and then you move on because, you're really only getting a spin.
Yeah, yeah. What's interesting in between all the description of the podcast and why you do what you do, I feel that we are translators, right? We take very complex things and try to make sure that the language and the call to action is digestible to those that need to hear it, listen to it, and so on and so forth. And I think it's part of the reason why folks like us still stay in this profession, because we're still trying to find the story, still trying to dig in, right? And asking with the 8-year-old in the backseat of the car, are we there yet? Are we there yet?
And
Are we there
yeah, and
yet?
what we do, it's not an immediate payday. It's like you said, if you're digging for a story, if you're having a conversation. I mean, my podcast is, and I know you've asked me about my business, and I'll get into that in a second. I
Yeah, please.
appreciate I appreciate the space for that
Absolutely.
too. But my podcast is primarily for community service, and I know yours is too. I don't make any money off of that. I invite people on to give them free visibility for both their business, if it pertains to that, or an organization, nonprofit or something. And, as far as what I do professionally, I'm a executive advising consultant for business leaders. So I like
Mm,
to work kind of the right-hand person to the executive, CEOs, executive directors, founders of organizations, and in particular with a focus on strategic communications and business development. So looking at the entire process and saying, okay, you know, here's what your communications are really saying versus what you may think they're saying. Do they align? So I do assessments. I align the communication touch points, any way that you communicate with a customer, email, website, in-person presentations, whatever it is. I look at the whole picture and give leaders a sense of alignment and direction to know, is what I'm saying about my business attracting the right customers? And if not, how do we fill those gaps? So that's what I do. I try to find the gaps, fill those, provide tools, suggestions, recommendations for how we can go about it. And that involves lots of things. Sometimes that's technology tweaks. Sometimes that's writing communication plans. So there's a process to it. But at the end of the day, good example, I'm working with a customer right now whose business is evolving. It's growing, and she has a certification program. She does intergenerational coaching. And so far, she's focused on families and individuals. The name of her organization, if anybody wants to check it out, is Bridging Generations. But what's interesting now is that she's created this whole certification program for intergenerational relationships in the workplace. So she's moving into more of a corporate environment while still maintaining family and individual services. So what I'm doing for her right now is great example of what I do for any leader in my business, in my consulting business, is take a look at the current situation, and we're redoing the site map for her website, where I'm going to rewrite the entire content process because her story no longer is told to reflect this evolution and this growth in her business. So I work with new business owners, but also people who are in a growth stage.
Great. I think the one thing that most people think of, and folks that are in our space that want to work with PR people, or they automatically think that we're just going to get a bunch of media coverage and magic happens. What I kind of have done over the years is describe our work as sort of, as you pointed out, business consultants. We're trying to drive the bottom line in some way, shape, or form, right? How does this work? The narrative, the language, the technology, the channels, the language, the content that lives in these things. How does it drive the proverbial needle for folks? And for years, us PR people would talk about things like impressions, right? Traffic to a website, all important things. And impressions are this, for those of you who don't know, you are get an article in the Boston Globe. A certain amount of people read the Globe on a daily basis. They have a certain amount of web traffic. That number results in the amount of potential eyeballs that article would get to potential people, which is frankly, and excuse my crassness, a kind of a bullshit number. Because like, who knows if it's 1.2? One of the things I've done recently, and it's taken me about 3 months to figure this out, and I don't really haven't told anybody about this just yet. The media coverage that I've secured in the last year and a half for the nonprofits that I work with has resulted in about $12.5 million in donations.
Congratulations to you and
So
to them. That's great.
yeah, like, and it makes me feel fucking fantastic. I'm like, hell yeah.
Should.
And I'm like, this is so awesome. But and the only way I've been able to do it is just make sure that when I get, podcast secured or a Globe article or something secured, that content gets put into marketing campaigns that has all the typical, UTM parameters, and because it's all driving people to a thank you or a landing page, or like, you should just give more to us if you can kind of vibe. But able to, and you need good partners on the client end to be able to understand how to track, how to pull reports, and because there's not a single tool that does all this for you. You've got to kind of piece together your Google Analytics platform. You got to pull together your social platform, all these little different tools. But been able to, with 3 months, it's been painstakingly impossible to do, but we figured it out. About $12.5 million, which is incredible. And I think when we talk about our business, it's not just about, hey, we're going to get you in an article and everything's going to be great, but how do we use the content to just generate additional conversations? And I think your podcast, your coaching. It's kind of why we work with executives and leaders at the top end, because we want to be in the room, right? Comms
Absolutely.
deserves a seat at that table. So, how about pivoting real quick as you're out there dealing with maybe pitching stories to the media, if you're dealing with that. I mean, you're dealing with some complex issues, and sometimes you need to bend a little bit to make the story fit. I mean, what's your strategy around working with the media or content generally? Because your client might want to say one thing, and your heart of heart says, you know what, you might want to pivot here. How do you counsel your clients through those tougher conversations?
Question, Don. I think one of the things I do is try to mine from previous experience that is very related to what you're describing, which is grant writing. I'm a certified grant writer. I can provide that service through my business. It's not the main focus. But one of the important things that grant writers do that's essential is helping the organization or individual or whoever it might be that's wanting funding to understand the difference between an idea and a project. Because you may have a great idea, you may want funding to do XYZ, but you've got to align your interests with those of the grantor, the people who are actually going to give you the funding. And to me, it's the same in the PR space. It's very similar. You've got to find that fine line, of course, between not sacrificing truth and integrity, but also, I mean, obviously, being truthful about your reporting, but at the same time, that's the intersection, and that what I help executive leaders do is look, you want to say this is what this particular channel is interested in. This is what they're looking for. Sometimes to get your message across, you've got to compromise a little bit, not sacrificing, the main thing that you're trying to do, but just figure out a way. And this is all about this is where the quality of communication really comes in, right? It's strategy. It isn't, you don't just write something and say, I want this, or this is what I think. It's got to be, it's got to be a two-way street.
Yep, agreed. And I think the hardest thing is teaching clients that, you know, yeah, I can get you into these newspapers. I get you on podcasts, and unless the podcast is like ours, where it's kind of free flowing, you have some scalability in it. But when dealing with your local newspaper, right? It's pretty easy to get into these local publications, but you have to remember that the content has to be focused on the audience, right? If it's for the Revere Journal, they're not going to cover something happening in Virginia unless it's a Revere resident doing something interesting outside of the city. Maybe it might fit. But for the Boston Globe, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, the higher you get up in that tier, it's less about, hey, cover us and put a spotlight on us, but rather, how do I fit into your one, what you cover, what you're covering now, what you're covering today, what you're covering this hour, and why it's relevant for your particular audiences. And sometimes you've got to be
Exactly.
the micro that fits into the macro. And so my work with nonprofits is sort of that micro macro strategy where nonprofits, as you know, are great at telling people about their mission and how to get involved and describing their events and their galas and everything else, but they're really horrible at showing the impact of the people the lives that they're changing. And
Hmm.
those are the stories that really sell the mission better than anything else that you and I can come up with. So that 12.5 that I mentioned is all focused around the people and the impact and the how those stories fit into macros. So we kind of have to continue to be journalists in some way, shape, or form because we got to pay attention to what's going on in the
Yeah,
media, what's
but
going
we're
on.
also strategists, man. I mean,
Exactly.
we got to look at the big
Yep.
picture, and that's the same thing. Like I was describing, with the client I'm working with, type of clients that I'm working with. Being an executive advisor is really something that I am very passionate about because a lot of times busy executives, they've got tunnel vision, and it's not their fault. It's just they have a certain job to do. They've got a
Big
big job
time
to do.
blinders, right? Blinders,
Yes,
as they'd say.
exactly. Yeah. So you gotta help them see the bigger picture and how all of that is gonna fit into how they communicate. And when you're talking about publications, again, audience is everything. Putting it says sending an op-ed to the Washington Post is an entirely different mindset and audience focus in terms of what people are looking for than it is, like you say, just the local town newspaper. All of those have value in one way or another. But you're so right, Don, about one of the probably the most important things that I help leaders do, and it's almost one of the first things we have to fix, whether it's on the website or it's in maybe they write newsletters. A lot of organizations have newsletters that go out and so forth. Again, generating those impressions, generating that traffic. Which, like you, I see the value, but I also am a bit of a skeptic too, because at the end of the day, if you build relationships, it'll come, and you and I are all about relationships before pitching. So, I'm adamant with that. Same thing with the AI space. We can't AI is a tool and it's awesome, and I use it every day. I know you do too, but you got to use it strategically. And so I'm
Mhm.
also integrating that more and more into my executive advising. It's one thing to use AI to do your weekly scheduling and make it more efficient and just dump a entire load into your calendar instead of manually putting one thing at a time. It's a whole other thing, and I see this all the time where they're using CRMs and pipelining sequencing to just throw out message after message after message. Those tools have a place, but one thing I try to counsel executive leaders on is, you can't be talking to you don't send somebody a survey just because they visited your website, or I mean, it's ridiculous. It pisses people.
Nailed
It
it.
pisses me off.
Yeah.
I don't do
Same.
it.
Same. Yeah,
So
I
these are
think
things. These are all things that they maybe don't think about, but we do. We are the sort of oversight, if you will, of all of these things. And when you're talking about publishing, absolutely. I mean, because this is about risk management for your business as much as it is promotion of your business. And you can't just talk about what you do. What you do is going to come through based on what you produce for people. When you produce results, you don't need to talk about what you do that much. It's going to come through. What you want to focus on is what is the problem that you're trying to solve for people. That's what they care about.
yeah, no, it's a great point. One on the AI side, I agree. We have to be orchestra leads, right? We have to be the people that are waving the wand. Let the tools do the things, but teach it, train it, refine it, make sure it's emblematic of the voice, the tone, and work it until it feels and sounds like what you want to communicate, and then automate what you can. Without the risk of ruining relationships and forgetting about the humanality in connecting with people, because that's really important, as you and I know. So that's kind of why I launched that small business growth advisor. Right? How do I get systems building around networking? And so for me, I feel like PR is the function in a business that helps create community around a product and service, right? And for public policy, it's creating community around an issue that people want to drive and make sure that gets into law to make these impacts. It's about building community around products, right? People are so passionate about sneakers and toys and gaming. There's community building in there, and I think PR is kind of a is the person and the executive that drives all that. And we are sort of always behind the scenes, behind the curtain, making sure the executives are the folks managing the community when it's kind of really us at the same time. So
We are the wizards
we kind of, yeah, with the
behind the
Wizard of
curtain.
Oz,
Yeah.
yeah, and but it's good
Yeah.
spin, right, versus the bad spin.
But I love it. I love it. I've never had a aspiration, and I mean, look, we need CEOs, we need people at the top. We got to have somebody in every part of a business, every organization. But what drives me has always been sort of that person behind the curtain. I don't mind being the face out front. I don't have any problem getting in front of a crowd of people and giving a speech. Done plenty of that. I know you're a very you know high social person too. It's not
Yeah,
that,
a little bit,
but
kind of
it's about
social, maybe
impact.
not.
But it's impact, it's for us, I think it's two things. It's relationships and the value of that and preserving it, and then the impact that we know it makes. It's not about, for me, I don't need to be in the spotlight. I don't need to be the one, that is, on the stage getting an award. I just want to make sure the organization or business that I serve is benefiting from the advice that I give them.
Big time. I think one of the other things we kind of you and I have talked about before is, the shoemakers' kids go without shoes, which means we are so busy doing what we do for everybody else that we forget to do it for ourselves. And before we started recording today, we're talking about some little short videos that I produce as I'm walking my dog. And
Yeah.
I've tried to get into a much aggressive habit around producing content around networking, around using Alignable or crisis communications, reputation management. And when people ask me, how do I drive business for my business or my small business or stuff for Alignable, I don't do any advertising. I mean, I just landed a speaking gig at the Public Relations Society of America here in Boston. And my topic is stop networking like an asshole. Right. And I got it because of the content I'm pushing out into the ethos there. Right. So, I mean, how do you go upon and what's your, you and I have talked about this, but how much is like too much in terms of being self-promotional versus just having conversations and putting content out there to be present? Like what's your thought process on, like, because you see it on LinkedIn, look at me versus
Yeah.
like, hey, I got something kind of interesting to say, give you some advice. What's that line look like for you?
That line for me is, I put my name on things. I put my business name, in posts and things like that. Let's take LinkedIn, for example. I'm pretty active on there, but I think it's the value add of the post. I want to share something that I think people can resonate with, whether they agree or disagree, because it's a discussion. But I think engagement is key. And that will sell itself. If people see, they're going to see your credibility. They're going to see your thought leadership involved in what you say, and the what you have to say about it, much more than, I do this, buy from me. I get these all the
Yeah,
time. I've had
brutal.
talked about how ticked off we get. I mean, the minute, and I get them all the time. I'll post something on LinkedIn, and what I'm more interested in is the people who looked at my profile afterwards, because they're a
Yeah.
little more curious than
Yep.
about what I say, or a,
Hmm.
a thoughtful comment that maybe is someone I want to reach out to. So it's strategy, right? It's not just posting something to pitch my business. I don't pitch. I talk about something of interest related to my industry, what I'm doing for people, talk about how I've helped people. But it's never, I don't put myself first. I let that speak for itself. I
Yeah.
try, to
Smart.
do that as
Smart.
much as possible. And I know you do too. I've seen your posts. They're awesome. It's always
Thank you.
about, consider this, right? Have you thought about it this way? Here's another angle to think about, something of value that people can take away from what you say that they could implement on their own, and it's fine. I think that, but you get these messages all the time. Oh, loved your post. Hey, I can help you get 10 million leads or whatever.
Yeah.
No, I, my,
No, you
my,
can't.
my no, you
No, you
can't.
can't.
And my
No.
aunt, even if you could, I'm not going to work with you, because you literally have people do this. And I responded to one the other day. I'm not a snippy person. A lot of times I just ignore them. But every now and then I will say, you could say hello and introduce yourself first.
Yeah, yeah, I know. People forget to do that. One of the things I've pivoted a little bit, and it's a handful of years here, that when you meet somebody at a networking event or even online, just going back and forth on LinkedIn, people want to say, "Hey, my name is X. I do this, and I want to meet these kinds of people." I learned to kind of flip that. Hey Don, so what do you do for work? Great question, Christy. You know what? I want to meet executive directors at New England-based nonprofits who struggle with communicating to their donors as a way to drive the mission through fundraising, and I help them by doing these things. Versus, I'm in public relations work with nonprofits. I start with the person I want to meet, the problem I'm helping them solve, and what I'm bringing to the table to help them do that. And if you follow that kind of narrative, it's if I say I want to meet any nonprofit, you're like, okay, great. What the hell does that mean? Let me throw a dart in the dark and hope I hit something versus nonprofit, New England, Health and Human Services, struggle with donor communications for fundraising through PR, 12.5 million, right? That narrative connects because now you're thinking, who do I know in the nonprofit space that's an ED that's in the New England market or in the US? You need to paint that picture for the people you're working with.
And it's specific, it's not general. And one organization, BNI, you mentioned them earlier in the show. I'm getting ready to re-up with them. Business Networking International, folks, great organization. They are truly international. There's chapters all over the world, in pretty much every major town or city. It's an opportunity to both learn and to do networking, but learn how to do it right. And they teach you how to do just what you said, Don. Be specific. If you can't say in 45 seconds or less what you do and the impact it makes and who you're looking to meet, then
You're
they can help
toast.
you work on that. And
Yep.
because you'll lose people. And I think, you brought up something there that kind of made me think of something else. I've changed significantly how I network in general, like not just with BNI or Alignable or anything like that. But wherever the space is, I'm looking for reciprocity. I'm looking for referrals with organizations. In my case, as an executive advisor, I do some of the implementation, particularly if it involves content writing, storytelling, because that's my niche, just like you. But let's say that it's somebody who is an expert in SEO or Google Analytics, Google Console stuff, right? Very important things, again, behind the scenes work. I know how to do that stuff, but it isn't my passion. And, depending upon how much time I've got from client to client, what I'm looking for are the referral partners that match that pipeline.
Hell
So,
yeah.
I'm doing
Yep.
a communication plan for somebody, an assessment, and I'm making recommendations. And then I may implement a certain amount of those, but I may also refer that client on to my referral partner. So I'm not looking for conversations to just make friends. Don't get me wrong. Relationships are about friendships. You and
Yeah,
I have become
totally.
good
Yep.
friends, and I value
Correct.
that wholeheartedly. But we also are working to actively try to get each other business,
Correct.
and that's
Yeah.
what we should be doing.
People want to work with those that they like, know, and trust. And at Alignable, we're talking about the align methodology, which is, being acquainted, liking somebody, investing in the relationship, right? And then giving, which is what you described, and then nurturing,
Mhm.
which is what you and I have talked dozens and dozens and dozens of times. And we can probably go on for like 9,000 hours going through this, but it's literally about not 5,000 connections, but the 50 people that you can trust. Like
Yes.
I've sent people your way, you send people my way because I know your lane, you know my lane. And at some point, we find a project where we can work together on it. Like you could be the public policy person because kind of not my jam. Maybe I'm the system builder or something like that. But it's just about being open to collaboration and finding opportunities. So where can people find you and find your company? Where can they get your details?
Amada Development Services. We are, my website is amadadevservices.com. You can email me, Christy at amadadevservices.com at any time. I like to say there's no bots in my business. So if you call me,
Hell
I'm
yeah.
going to answer that phone, and if I don't, leave me a message and I will get back to you. But you will hear from me and not some strange AI assistant.
And I can vouch for that because anytime I reached out and communicated with Christy, it's my gal right on the horn. She's right there for me. Give me the website address one more time so people can hear it.
Amada Dev Services.com. So
Fantastic.
my last name, Amada, as you see on the screen, Amada, not Armada, not Amanda.
Armada.
I get those all the time. Yeah.
I get Martinello, Martinini. I'm like, no, it's Martelli. Okay, it's Martelli. Figure it out. And I get Dan all the time too, because the O sometimes looks like an A, but no, it's Don Martelli. Yeah.
Oh,
Anyways, and so where's your podcast hosted?
It's on YouTube. That's kind of the primary place. So if you look for Policy for Normal People, you'll find it there.
Hell yeah, great title, such a great title.
Thank you. Yeah, I got to tell you, it's appropriated from one of my other favorite podcasts. I love to tell the story, and I still listen to it, even though I'm not even sure they're still recording new ones. But Wine for Normal People. I'm a wine enthusiast. I just for fun, I've been going through certification programs, so I've done the first reset certification for wine outside of the UK. But totally a side thing. But Wine for Normal People is a great podcast. And the whole idea there is similar to mine being Policy for Normal People. I appropriate it, kind of from their idea that, they don't talk about wine for snobs. They talk about it for normal people just to learn and educate themselves. It doesn't need to be a mystery, and neither does policy. Policy does not need to be some big mystery that's only for politicians.
Break it down, translate, as we said before. Good stuff. Well, Christy, it's been fun having you yet again on the PR Bunker podcast. We'll absolutely do it one more time and many times over. So good luck with the podcast. Keep grinding and, stay locked in, as we say. But thank you for joining the PR Bunker podcast.
Good luck to you too, Don. Thanks so much for having me on. I'll see you next time.
Anytime, my friend, anytime.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
That's the PR Bunker podcast, hosted by Don Martelli. Here's the thesis. Reputation is the operating system for your business. It's the one asset that works while you sleep. When you need to defend it, repair it, or build it, start at prbunker.com. And for a sharper way to build the relationships that actually get you to yes, subscribe to the Anti-Networking Playbook on Substack. New every week. When reputation decides the outcome, be ready. We'll see you next time, and remember, stay locked in.